Imagine knowing the exact moment of your death. Would you face it with calm acceptance, or would you wonder if something more sinister was at play? For one of history's greatest spiritual leaders, this wasn't just a hypothetical question. In 483 BC, at 80 years old, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, embarked on what would be his final journey. His body was failing, yet his mind remained as sharp as ever. He knew his time was near. But was it simply old age that claimed him, or did something more deliberate hasten his end? I'm Peter, and today we're diving deep into the mystery of Buddha's last days. We'll follow his final footsteps, decode his parting wisdom, and unravel the shocking controversy. Was Buddha poisoned? Why does the death of the Enlightened One still captivate us more than 2,500 years later? What secrets did he take to the grave? And what lessons did he leave behind for us? This is the untold story of Buddha's final days, a journey of mystery, wisdom, and perhaps betrayal. Buddha's last pilgrimage began in the city of Rajagaha. At 80 years old, his body was frail, yet his mind remained as clear as ever. Despite his declining health, he insisted on traveling north to Kushinagar, a journey spanning over 200 miles. As Buddha and his loyal disciple Ananda set out, whispers spread among his followers. Why this arduous trek? Why now? Some claim Buddha chose this path knowing it would be his last journey. Others saw it as a final test, a demonstration of his teachings on impermanence and detachment. Along the way, Buddha stopped at villages and towns, offering his final teachings. He spoke about the inevitability of change, the importance of compassion, and the path to liberation. Every step brought him closer to his final resting place, yet his mission remained unchanged, to guide others until the very end. His declining health was evident. With each passing day, his body weakened, yet he pressed on, embodying the very resilience and mindfulness he had taught for decades. This last pilgrimage became a living lesson, a demonstration of how to face life's greatest challenge, death itself, with grace and wisdom. Did Buddha know his end was near? As Buddha's final journey unfolded, a question arose among his disciples. Did he know his end was near? The evidence suggests he did. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, one of the most revered Buddhist texts detailing Buddha's final days, he made a startling proclamation. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will pass into final nirvana. This was no vague premonition. Buddha was fully aware of his impending death. Even more striking, he had deliberately rejected the option to extend his life, choosing instead to relinquish his will to live. But Buddha's foreknowledge went beyond mere prediction. He meticulously planned his final days, choosing specific locations and audiences for his last teachings. He settled old disputes, gave final instructions to his disciples, and even arranged the details of his own funeral. This awareness didn't lead to fear or despair. Instead, Buddha used his impending death as a final, powerful teaching. He demonstrated how to face mortality with equanimity, turning his own passing into his last profound lesson on impermanence. But this foreknowledge raises intriguing questions. Was this a display of superhuman insight, or was it the calm acceptance of a man who had spent a lifetime preparing for this moment? Whatever the case, Buddha's approach to death became one of his most enduring teachings. The meal that changed history. As Buddha and his disciples neared Kushinagar, they stopped in a small village called Pava. There, a devout metalsmith named Kunda invited Buddha to his home for a special meal. This seemingly simple act of hospitality would become one of the most talked about meals in religious history. Buddha's final journey, Kunda prepared a dish known as Sukara Madhava. The exact nature of this food remains a mystery. Some translate it as tender pork, while others suggest it was a type of mushroom or truffle-like delicacy. Whatever it was, Buddha accepted the offering with gratitude. But shortly after eating, Buddha fell ill. He experienced severe pain and dysentery. His followers were horrified, yet in a remarkable display of compassion, Buddha's thoughts were not of blame or regret, but of kindness toward Kunda. He instructed Ananda to reassure Kunda, saying, "Offering a Buddha's last meal is an act of great merit, not something to regret." Even in his final suffering, Buddha radiated compassion, turning what could have been a moment of fear into a profound lesson on acceptance and gratitude. Was Buddha poisoned? The controversy. The nature of Buddha's final meal has sparked centuries of debate. Was it simply food poisoning from spoiled or contaminated food? Or was there something more sinister at play? While most Buddhist traditions reject the poisoning theory, some scholars and historians have speculated otherwise. Could it be possible that someone intentionally poisoned Buddha, fearing the influence of his teachings? Buddha himself never blamed anyone. Instead, he embraced his fate, demonstrating one last act of complete detachment from earthly concerns. Buddha's last words. A final teaching. Despite his worsening condition, Buddha insisted on continuing to Kushinagar. He trudged on, stopping frequently to rest, his resilience serving as one last lesson to his followers. Finally, on his final night, Buddha lay between two sal trees, surrounded by his devoted disciples. In his last moments, he offered one final teaching, saying, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence." These words were his ultimate message, reminding his followers that everything in life is fleeting, even the Buddha himself. With those final words, he entered parinirvana, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the world for millennia. More than 2,500 years later, Buddha's final journey, last teachings, and mysterious death continue to fascinate and inspire millions. His passing was not an end, but a culmination of everything he taught: impermanence, self-reliance, and the path to inner peace. Whether you see his final meal as a simple misfortune or something more deliberate, one thing is clear: Buddha's wisdom remains immortal. What do you think about Buddha's last journey? Was it fate, acceptance, or something more mysterious? Let's discuss in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more wisdom-packed content. The mystery of Buddha's last moments. Was he poisoned? The question of whether Buddha was poisoned has sparked centuries of debate. Most scholars today believe that his death was simply the result of old age and the harsh conditions of his final journey. However, the mystery lingers, adding yet another layer of intrigue to Buddha's last days. Some ancient texts suggest that the Sukara Madhava, the meal offered to Buddha by the metalsmith Kunda, contained poison, either accidentally or intentionally. This theory gained traction over time, leading to various interpretations. Some claim it was a tragic mistake, while others argue it was a deliberate act, with motives ranging from jealousy to a misguided attempt at spiritual service. Yet many scholars reject the poisoning theory outright. They argue that it is likely a later addition to the story, possibly meant to draw parallels with other religious figures or to emphasize Buddha's superhuman endurance. These experts point out that Buddha's symptoms align with natural causes, especially considering his advanced age and the extreme physical demands of his final journey. Interestingly, Buddha himself dismissed any notion of foul play. In his final hours, rather than blaming Kunda, he praised the meal, calling it equal in merit to the meal that preceded his enlightenment. This statement suggests that Buddha saw his last meal not as the cause of his death, but as a significant spiritual event. The controversy surrounding Buddha's last meal serves as a reminder of the complex interplay between history, legend, and spiritual teaching in religious narratives. Whether poisoned or not, this meal became a powerful symbol of Buddhist teachings on acceptance, impermanence, and the illusory nature of physical existence. Buddha's final arrival in Kushinagar. After his arduous final journey, Buddha arrived at Kushinagar, a small town nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas. This seemingly unremarkable place was destined to become one of Buddhism's most sacred sites. As they entered the town, Buddha directed Ananda to prepare a resting place between two sala trees. The choice was deliberate. Buddha had been born under a sala tree, and now he would pass away between them, completing the full circle of his earthly existence. Despite his weakening body, Buddha's mind remained clear and focused. He used this moment to impart a final lesson on impermanence, telling Ananda, all compounded things are subject to decay. Strive with diligence. Even in choosing his final resting place, Buddha transformed the moment into a teaching. The setting sun painted the sky in vibrant hues as he lay down on his right side, his head facing north. As if sensing the momentous occasion, the sala trees burst into an unseasonal bloom, showering pale petals upon the dying sage. Kushinagar, once an obscure town, was about to witness an event that would echo through millennia. The stage was set for Buddha's final teachings, his last breaths, and his passage into parinirvana, the ultimate release from the cycle of rebirth. Buddha's final words then asked the last teaching. As Buddha reclined beneath the sala trees, he seized this final opportunity to impart his most essential wisdom. Despite his failing body, his mind remained razor-sharp, and his words carried the weight of a lifetime's teachings. Kneeling nearby was his devoted disciple Ananda. For decades, Ananda had walked beside Buddha, witnessing his teachings and spreading the Dharma. But now, as the end neared, Ananda's heart was heavy. How could he accept the loss of his teacher, his guide, his friend? His eyes filled with unshed tears, betraying the sorrow he struggled to contain. Buddha, ever attuned to the emotions of those around him, turned his compassionate gaze toward Ananda. His voice, though weak, was steady and reassuring. "You have done much good, Ananda. You have been by my side through it all. Do not let sorrow cloud your mind. The time for your own awakening is near." These words, so simple yet filled with deep compassion, touched Ananda profoundly. Even in his final moments, Buddha was teaching, not just to his assembled followers, but to Ananda personally. His master's final lesson was not about clinging to attachment, but about letting go, even of the dearest bonds, for all things are impermanent. Buddha's last message to the Sangha, turning his attention to the Sangha, his community of monks, Buddha prepared to give his final words. His voice, though fading, was filled with purpose. His message was simple, yet profound. The last truth he would ever share. All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence. With these words, Buddha reminded his followers that everything in life is fleeting. Even he, their beloved teacher, would one day be gone. He urged them not to cling to his presence, but to walk the path with determination. His teachings were never about worshiping him, but about discovering truth through direct experience. And then, as the sala trees rained down their blossoms, as the sky darkened into night, Buddha entered parinirvana, leaving behind a legacy that would guide the world for thousands of years. The eternal legacy of Buddha's passing. More than 2,500 years later, Buddha's last journey, final teachings, and mysterious death continue to fascinate and inspire millions. His passing was not an end, but a culmination of everything he taught: impermanence, self-reliance, and the path to inner peace. Whether one sees his final meal as a simple misfortune or something more deliberate, one thing remains certain. Buddha's wisdom is immortal. His last words were a reminder not to seek permanence in a world of change, but to walk the path with diligence. So what do you think? Was Buddha's final journey fate, a lesson in acceptance, or something more mysterious? Let's discuss in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more wisdom-packed content. Buddha's final moments, the last teachings and the legacy he left behind. As the time of his passing drew near, Buddha gathered his disciples one last time. Sitting among them, his frail body showing the marks of age and illness, his mind remained as clear as ever. With a calm voice, he spoke. "Monks, if you have any doubts or uncertainties concerning the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha, ask now. Do not later regret that you missed this opportunity." He urged them to speak freely, to clarify anything that remained unresolved. Yet his invitation was met with silence. It was a powerful testament to the clarity and completeness of his teachings over the years. His disciples had absorbed his wisdom, and now as he prepared to leave them, they had no lingering questions. Buddha then delivered what would be known as the Four Great References, guidelines meant to preserve his teachings for future generations. He emphasized that after his passing, any claim of his words should always be compared with the suttas and Vinaya, the sacred texts of his recorded teachings in the monastic code. "This will be your safeguard against misinterpretation," he instructed. "It will ensure that the Dharma remains intact and uncorrupted." With this, Buddha secured the longevity of his teachings, ensuring they would continue to guide seekers long after his departure. Buddha's final words to Ananda. In a moment of deep compassion, Buddha turned to his devoted attendant, Ananda, who had served him faithfully for years. Despite all he had learned, Ananda struggled with overwhelming sorrow. His heart was heavy, and though he had practiced non-attachment, this was different. This was his teacher, his guide, his friend. Buddha, sensing Ananda's turmoil, offered words of comfort. "You have done much good, Ananda. You have been by my side through it all. Do not let sorrow cloud your mind. The time for your own awakening is near." These words, simple yet profound, soothed Ananda's grief. They reminded him that even the most precious bonds must one day be released. With this realization, peace washed over him. He understood at last. The greatest act of love is letting go. A final act of compassion, Subhada's awakening. Even in his last hours, Buddha's compassion remained boundless. When he heard that an aged ascetic named Subhada wished to speak with him, Ananda objected, thinking his master was too weak. But Buddha, ever dedicated to guiding others, overruled him. "Let him come," he said, "for he seeks enlightenment." Subhada approached with a heart full of questions, and despite his failing strength, Buddha spoke with the same clarity and wisdom he always had. In that brief conversation, Subhada found the answers he had long sought. Mere hours before Buddha's passing, he became his final direct disciple, attaining enlightenment under his guidance. This last conversion was a testament to Buddha's unwavering commitment. Even on his deathbed, he continued to lead others toward liberation. Buddha's last teaching, the impermanence of all things. As midnight approached, Buddha addressed his disciples one last time. His voice, though weak, still carried the weight of truth. All compounded things are subject to dissolution. Strive on with diligence. These were his final teachings, the essence of his lifelong message: impermanence, non-attachment, and the pursuit of enlightenment. He reminded his followers not to grieve his departure, but to continue their practice diligently. His disciples, though deeply moved, knew that this was the final lesson their teacher had to offer. Even in his last breath, he embodied the very equanimity he had taught for decades. The air grew heavy with emotion. Buddha's breathing became shallower, his body slowly succumbing to the inevitable. The monks, realizing these were truly their final moments with him, struggled to fully accept what he had told them so many times, that all things must pass. Buddha's final meditation, a mind fully awakened. As the night deepened, Buddha entered his final meditation. His breathing slowed, his body still and at peace. His mind remained clear, serene, and unshaken, just as it had always been. His disciples watched in reverent silence, witnessing what they had only heard of in teachings, the final transition of an enlightened being. As his consciousness moved through the stages of deep meditation, he passed into parinirvana, the final and complete liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The sala trees, standing tall above him, began to shed their blossoms, covering the ground like a celestial offering. The night sky stretched vast above him, a reflection of the boundless wisdom and compassion he had given to the world. And then all was still. The end of an era. The beginning of a legacy. With Buddha's passing, an era had ended, but his legacy had only just begun. His words, his teachings, and his path to enlightenment would continue to resonate for thousands of years. More than 2,500 years later, the lessons from his final moments still guide seekers around the world. His last words remind us that nothing in this world is permanent, not even life itself. But in impermanence, there is liberation. His final instruction was not to worship him, nor to hold on to his presence, but to walk the path with diligence, to seek the truth within themselves. And so, the Sangha mourned, but they also understood. Buddha had not left them. He had simply fulfilled his journey. He had shown them the way. Now it was up to them to follow it. What do you think about Buddha's final journey? Did his last words resonate with you? How do they inspire your own path? Let's discuss in the comments below. If you found this story insightful and inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more wisdom-packed content. Buddha began to move through the jhanas, the deep meditative states he had mastered decades ago. His breathing slowed, his body became still, yet a subtle radiance seemed to emanate from him. Even in his final moments, Buddha was teaching, demonstrating how to face death with complete awareness and serenity. Then suddenly the earth trembled, and a soft light enveloped the Sala Grove. Buddha slowly opened his eyes. gazed at his disciples with infinite compassion, and uttered his last words. With a final exhalation, he entered parinirvana, the state beyond birth and death. For a moment, time stood still. The gathered monks, despite years of learning about impermanence, were stunned by the finality of the moment. Anuruddha, one of Buddha's closest disciples, broke the silence, reciting a stanza. All must lay aside the aggregates in this world. A master such as this, a supreme person, a conqueror with power of will, the Tathagata has attained nirvana. As dawn broke, casting its first light over the Sala Grove, the news of Buddha's passing began to spread. The Enlightened One had entered nirvana. An era had ended, but the impact of this moment would ripple through centuries to come. Buddha's final words, a call to action. In the stillness of that fateful night, Buddha's final words echoed through the grove, leaving an indelible mark on his disciples and shaping the future of Buddhism. Now, O monks, I declare to you, all conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. These weren't merely parting words. They were the distillation of his entire philosophy, a final reminder of the core truths he had spent his life illuminating. The first part, all conditioned things are subject to decay, reinforced the fundamental Buddhist concept of impermanence. Buddha used his own passing as the ultimate lesson, showing that even an enlightened being is subject to the natural law of dissolution. The second part, strive on with diligence, was a call to action. It urged his followers not to despair at his passing, but to redouble their efforts on the path to enlightenment. The responsibility for spiritual awakening, he emphasized, lies within each individual. These last words embody the essence of Buddha's teachings, a clear-eyed acceptance of reality coupled with an empowering call to spiritual effort. Today, they continue to inspire millions of Buddhists worldwide, serving as a guiding compass for those walking the path to enlightenment. The reactions to Buddha's passing. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the Sala Grove, the reality of Buddha's departure began to sink in. The reactions among his disciples varied, reflecting the full spectrum of human emotion. Some of the younger, less advanced monks wept openly, their cries piercing the morning air. Too soon has the Blessed One passed away, they lamented, overwhelmed by grief. Others sat in stunned silence, struggling to comprehend the loss of their teacher. In stark contrast, the elder monks, who had absorbed Buddha's teachings more deeply, remained composed. Anuruddha, displaying remarkable equanimity, reminded the gathering, "Enough, friends. Do not sorrow, do not lament. Has not the Blessed One already told us that all things that are pleasant and delightful are changeable, subject to separation and becoming other?" His words reminded them of what Buddha had always taught. Nothing in this world is permanent. Even the greatest beings must eventually pass away. Yet among them, one man struggled the most, Ananda, Buddha's devoted attendant. Having spent decades at his master's side, he found himself caught between grief and duty. His sorrow was deep, yet he knew he had an important task ahead. Taking a deep breath, he set out to inform the neighboring Malla clan, in whose territory Kushinagar lay. The news spread rapidly, and soon preparations for Buddha's funeral rites began. A celebration of a life, not just a mourning of death. The Malla people arrived in great numbers, carrying flowers, incense, and musical instruments to honor the Buddha. But rather than a solemn mourning, they chose to celebrate his life and teachings. For 7 days, they paid homage to his body, creating a festival-like atmosphere. There were celestial songs, sacred dances, and elaborate offerings. Buddha's passing was not just an ending, but a transition, a reminder that his legacy would live on through the Dharma in his disciples. This period of reverence and reflection became a living lesson in his teachings. It showed that grief and sorrow could coexist with wisdom and gratitude. Buddha's departure was not a tragedy. It was the final, perfect embodiment of the truths he had preached his entire life. His disciples, even in their sorrow, understood. Though the Master has left his body, his wisdom remains. His teachings were now in their hands. It was their responsibility to carry the Dharma forward, ensuring that generations to come would continue to benefit from his enlightened wisdom. Thus, from the ashes of loss arose a new determination to preserve, practice, and spread the Dharma, ensuring that Buddha's message would never fade from the world. How Buddha died. the untold story of his final days, teachings, and last words. A legacy that transcends time. More than 2,500 years later, the impact of Buddha's final moments is still felt. His last words continue to resonate, a reminder that our journey to awakening is in our own hands. Strive on with diligence. His teachings, like a beacon in the darkness, guide those who seek truth, wisdom, and inner peace. Buddha may have entered parinirvana, but his presence remains woven into the fabric of human consciousness. His wisdom endures, shaping the lives of those who dare to walk the path of compassion, mindfulness, and enlightenment. And so his journey never truly ended. It simply continues through us all. Final thought. Buddha's passing was not a tragedy, but a final teaching in impermanence. His message was clear. Do not cling to what is fleeting. Instead, seek truth, practice mindfulness, and awaken the wisdom within. For the path to enlightenment is not behind us. It is ahead. Understanding impermanence and non-attachment is central to Buddhist philosophy. Yet it's often in the experience of loss and grief that the practice truly transforms us. Buddha's death marked not an end, but a new beginning. His passing into parinirvana set in motion a legacy that would profoundly shape the spiritual landscape of the world for millennia to come. In the days following his death, Buddha's closest disciples gathered to preserve his teachings. This led to the First Buddhist Council, where Buddha's words were collected, codified, and passed on for future generations. This act of preservation laid the foundation for Buddhism to spread across Asia and eventually the globe. Though his physical form had passed, his wisdom would endure, keeping his teachings alive for all who sought enlightenment. Buddha's final days became a powerful teaching in themselves. His foreknowledge of death, his final journey, and his serene passing all served to reinforce his core teachings on impermanence and the importance of living mindfully. These events, as much as his words, continue to inspire Buddhist practitioners to this day. The manner of Buddha's death had a profound impact on Buddhist philosophy. It underscored the truth that even the most enlightened beings are subject to the natural laws of existence, reinforcing the Buddhist view that all things are transient. This realization is not a source of despair, but a powerful reminder of reality. Everything is subject to change, and in that truth lies liberation. Perhaps most significantly, Buddha's passing transformed him from a living teacher into a universal symbol of enlightenment. Temples, statues, and stupas containing his relics spread across the world. These became focal points for devotion, keeping his teachings alive and serving as reminders of the path to awakening. Today, more than 2,500 years after his death, Buddha's influence continues to grow. His teachings on mindfulness, compassion, and the nature of the mind have found new audiences in the West, influencing fields as diverse as psychology, neuroscience, and popular culture. In his death, as in his life, Buddha left us with a profound truth. True immortality lies not in the preservation of the body, but in the enduring impact of wisdom shared and lives transformed. His life and his death both serve as profound lessons on impermanence. Buddha showed us that while our physical bodies will inevitably return to the earth, the wisdom and teachings we impart to others can live on long after we are gone. As we conclude our exploration of Buddha's final days, we're left with a profound sense of how one life and one death can echo through the ages. Buddha's passing was not just the end of an era, it was a final, powerful lesson. It was a demonstration of his teachings on impermanence, mindfulness, and the path to liberation. From his foreknowledge of death to his last words, Buddha showed us how to face life's greatest challenge with grace and wisdom. His journey reminds us that every moment is an opportunity for awakening, even, perhaps, especially, our last. But the story of Buddha's death is more than just a historical account or a religious tale. It is a reminder of our own mortality and an invitation to live more fully. Buddha's final moments remind us of an uncomfortable truth. Our time here is limited. We cannot escape death, but in this truth lies freedom. What would you change if you knew today was your last? How can we, like Buddha, live fully and with purpose, knowing that every moment is precious? These are not just questions for monks and spiritual seekers. They are questions for all of us, at any stage of life. So I challenge you, take Buddha's last words to heart. Remember that all things are subject to change, and let that knowledge spur you to action. What will you do today, this week, this year, to live more fully, more mindfully? Will you dedicate yourself more deeply to your spiritual practice? Will you offer more compassion to others? Will you cultivate more mindfulness in your daily life? The time is now. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How has this exploration of Buddha's final days impacted you? What lessons will you carry forward in your life? Whether you are already practicing or just starting, let us reflect on the wisdom Buddha left us. If you found value in this video, please like and subscribe to Buddha's Wisdom. We have many more videos diving deep into Buddhist teachings and how they apply to our modern lives. Remember, as Buddha taught us, every ending is also a beginning. So let's begin our practice anew, with diligence and awareness. Until next time, may you find peace in impermanence, and may you live each moment with the wisdom and grace Buddha shared with the world. The story of the Buddha's death offers a profound lesson on impermanence and how to face death. The Buddha taught that, whether we achieve enlightenment or not, all of us must face the dissolution of the body, and nothing lasts forever. Therefore, we must live each moment fully, without attachment, and focus on cultivating the mind through meditation and mindfulness. Remember, each day is an opportunity to grow, develop ourselves, and perform acts of kindness. Instead of worrying about the future or regretting the past, we should use the present to live meaningfully, with peace and wisdom. Learn to accept that everything changes and maintain inner tranquility in the face of life's challenges.